what if what you're doing by holding on to all the work because you think it's cheaper, faster, safer, is actually holding you and your team back? And that seems to be something that like most managers really struggle with. Tell us what you consider or how you would define effective delegation.
Okay, so there's a couple different frameworks that I want to talk through. So the first one is understanding that delegation is not an all or nothing. I'll give you an example. So every week I have a newsletter that goes out to my community. And in the beginning, it took me a long time to write everything, to create the graphics. And when I hired my very first assistant, I was scared out of my mind to give this to her. But I was having this all or nothing mindset that said, I'm either going to give her this whole task or I'm going to keep it myself. So we need to shift away from this all or nothing and instead look at delegation. I call them the 5 S's. So it starts with set free. This is the highest level of you can give someone a task and they just run with it and you basically get out of the way. You tell them what the goal is and give them an example or send them in the right direction and then they have total freedom. A step down from that, I call the sandbox. And this is where you give a lot of parameters and guidance, but within that, you give the person a lot of freedom. So you can set the goal, but also be very clear about timeline and budget and criteria and anything else that feels like they need to know that's up front. But as long as they stay within these parameters, I'm okay with how they do the work and I'm okay with the different decisions that they might make along the way. Then we step down to safety nets. And this is what I ended up doing partially with the newsletter. So safety nets is where you create a lot of opportunities for you to catch mistakes along the way. And this is one of those mistakes that we often make is we hand something over and then we don't see it till it's done. Right. And then we're like, wait a second, there's so many problems. When you take a safety net approach, you're intentionally building in opportunities for you to check in. So for example, if someone's going to be working on a project, the first thing you might ask them to see is, I want to see your project plan. Before you start working on the actual tasks, just bring me your plan and we're going to talk through that. I'm going to make sure the plan itself hits all the things that I think it needs to hit. We keep moving down. Then we have scaffolding, which is really around checklists and templates and putting in those structures that give them even more guidance on how to do a task. So for the newsletter example, we have a template, makes it much easier for someone to fill in all the information. And I don't have to worry that they're going to do something crazy in that newsletter that I'm going to catch later because they're just following the template. And then the very last one is sectioning, which is when you give someone a piece of the work, but not the whole work. So with my newsletter, the first thing I started having my assistants do was just create the copy. I still created the images. I still put in all the links. I still sent it out. I just had them work on copy until I felt like they were writing in the right tone of voice and understood how I wanted the content to come across. And once they got that, then I added in the graphics and waited until they really understood how to create the graphics in the tone and the style that I wanted. So you can build through sections over time instead of handing everything off.
Yeah. And I think one of the frustrations with being the person who has been delegated to is you do all this work and then it's the final product. And then the person is like, this isn't good enough. And, or it like basically make you start all over. And I think that that's probably one of the biggest mistakes that I see with delegation in terms of like the impact on morale. So the undermining. So I like how you set it up where it's like different ways to cut it up and make it so people can prove themselves in stages and also get like support and feedback at different stages without like being overwhelmed all the way. And then, ultimately, like it's basically putting somebody on the highway and they get to choose which lane they're driving and they get to choose how they get there, ultimately, the path that they take.
Yeah. And one thing that is part of this process, and we'll kind of jump to the end piece of this. If you have opportunities along the way to have those check-ins and to offer support, it can do 2 things. It can alleviate some of the stress and the questions, because in some people, for them, and I've had team members who are like this, where if I delegate something, they get very nervous. Yeah. They're worried they're going to do it wrong. They have a ton of questions. They don't feel confident making decisions. And so when you tell them up front, hey, don't worry about this. We have check-ins. We have our regular check-ins. We can schedule some special meetings. If you have questions, come to me and ask. And we're going to intentionally build in some times for us to review things along the way so that you feel confident moving forward at every step, because that's what I want for you.
I think that piece is critical. It's not just open door. Like I hear this all the time from managers where they're like, well, it's open door and they knew they could come. That's a big thing for somebody to come in and be like, I know you told me to do this and I'm having a hard time. That's a big thing. Whereas if you just put in like pre-planned, these are the meetings that we're having to discuss what's going on, I think it does two things for you. I think it eliminates the putting all the responsibility on the person. It's a shared responsibility. And I think it's giving deadlines that, and like we know nothing gets done until like a deadline is looming.
Yes, exactly.
And so the more deadlines you have, the more the process gets moved along.
With the one caveat, or kind of the other bucket of folks that I see, and I've had team members like this as well, if you don't tell them up front that you're having these check-ins and why, they feel micromanaged. You need to see every little thing before I do it. Like, really? Like this, or all these check-ins that you have when you're reaching out to them and saying, hey, I just want to check in and see where things stand. They feel like you don't trust them, that you need to be on top of them. And we don't want that either. And so by laying that plan out up front to say, right, I'm delegating this thing for you. I've put some time on our calendar. I want to check in on this every single week. It's not that I don't trust you. It's just that I want to make sure that I'm always aware of where things stand. And I feel like this is the easiest way to do that. By saying that up front, it alleviates you're trying to micromanage me and sets a different expectation that you just want to be informed. And now they know what that means and what that looks like.
I think it's setting that expectation is really important. The other thing that I would add to it is that like you're setting it up as this is a process of delegation, which means this is the beginning stage of delegation. And then, once I know you've got your legs underneath you, we'll start pulling back more and more.
Yes.
As they see progress. And I would actually call out the progress, I think, because I think people need that. So like, as like you get more comfortable, like, okay, they did this segment, for your newsletter. Okay, you've got the tone of voice right. So we're now going to move on to the next thing that I would love for you to tackle.
Exactly.
I think so much with the micromanaging comes down to like just not really having very clear expectations. And, the flip side of being called a micromanager is that basically you're aloof and people hate aloof more than they hate micromanaging. So, it's definitely a balance that you have to work through. And I think setting expectations is maybe one of the best tools for that.
Absolutely.
Can you tell me, like, do you have an interesting success story when it comes to delegation?
Oh, I have so many stories. I think one of my favorites, though, is I had a young woman who is working with me, and I wanted to put together a kind of press kit so that I could go out and get on more podcasts like this one. And at the time, I was basically just having her like write an email and linking to my website. But as a podcast host myself, I realized like, this is not good enough. I'm getting all kinds of really cool things from people who want to be on my show. And like, I really should have this kind of like professional press kit. But I didn't spend a lot of time thinking about what that would look like or be like. I had some sense in my head of what I wanted. But I asked her, I said, can you just put together a press kit for me? And let's talk about it in 2 weeks or whatever it was. And this was the set free. We'd been working together for a long time and I really trusted her. So I said, that's what I want is I want a press kit. That's the extent of the guidance. And I kind of assumed that, she'd come back with stuff and I'd have thoughts and suggestions and pieces to add, but I wanted to give her some space to really run with it. So we met up after, the 2 weeks that she had to put together, and she showed me what she had done, and I was blown away. I mean, it was better than what I had imagined, and it was better than what I would have asked her to do. If I had said, I need one pager on this, and I need to have 5 different shows I've already been on, and I need to have all of these stats, like I could have done that. That would have been more of like a sandbox or a scaffolding approach. Mm-hmm. I'm so, so glad I didn't do that, because what she came back with was beyond my expectations. And that's the beauty of when you have somebody that you trust, of being able to give them the minimal, just the goal, and let them run with it. So that for me is like the best success story I've experienced with delegation.